He is considered South Africa's greatest ever opening batsman, but even more impressively, he is the country's most successful captain, having led the Proteas to historic series wins in Australia and England and the team to the top of the world test rankings. Graeme Smith was made captain at the tender age of 22 and stamped his authority on the team early on. He was accomplished in all forms of cricket and had a sensational career on the field. He's now turned to the administrative side of the game as Cricket South Africa's Director of Cricket at the ripe old age of 39. Given the challenges that face cricket both on and off the field, which are compounded by the uncertainty over the coronavirus pandemic sweeping the globe, these are difficult times everywhere. I'm Craig Ray, and it's a pleasure to have Graeme Smith on the Maverick Sports Podcast this week.
Two toughest customers in the South African side are Graeme Smith and Mark Boucher, and they're out there now. And if you wanted two to win a game for you, these are the two you'd pick.
That's clipped away fine. That'll go all the way to the boundary. That's another Test match 100 to Graeme Smith. What a series he's having. He becomes the 8th South African to score a century at Lord's.
Welcome, Graeme.
Morning, Craig. Thanks for the nice intro.
Well, let's just jump straight in with Director of Cricket. Let's start at the back end rather than work our way backwards. It's a big challenge, isn't it? Not just because of coronavirus, but obviously the Proteas in a difficult position. You took over at a tumultuous time. What's been your sort of take on the first 4 or 5 months in the job?
It certainly has been interesting. I mean, we jumped right in at late December, just before England arrived. And, I think initially it's focused on the cricket. I think, we needed to try and get some strong leadership in the environment. I think there was an area that was really lacking. I think Faf was almost in many ways, controlling everything and carrying a huge can. And the environment needed to grow and needed a lot of international experience and support. Yeah, I felt that Faf was taking on too much, and we really had to grow our player pool. We had to increase the leadership around the group. We had to do a lot more coaching than I think we initially expected. There was a lot more sort of time and effort spent on basics and working on techniques and thinking around the game than what we had initially thought. So, from the cricket perspective, we also grew a larger pool of players through, in particular, the one-day series against England, the T20s and Australia. We wanted to, test that pool and see what we got. And we wanted an extensive winter program that we had in place that after Corona had hit, we had to re-navigate that process. So, it's been interesting. I think from my own personal perspective, I've been dragged into commercial TV rights, rebuilding relationships with Saka and the player bodies, rebuilding the women's side of the game. So it's been all in.
Yeah, but it sounds like an exciting challenge. I mean, just the one thing I pick up on there, you said you had to do a lot more coaching than you wanted to do. Would that not normally be the case at the highest level? I always wonder about cricket coaching at test level. I mean, what does that actually mean? I mean, when you were playing, did someone come and say to you, you need to keep your bat and pad closer together or something like that?
I think we thought that obviously there's the technical side, there's the way that you think about batting as well, there's game plans, there's strategies. What's the thought behind what you're trying to achieve as well, and I think that those are the aspects that we had to spend a lot of time on. I mean, I think particularly in the batting lineup, a lot of experience had been lost, a number of new players. And sometimes you can just bat and you can just bowl, and there's not a technical thought. There's not a game plan of how you're going to play against a certain attack or a certain bowler, like in particular, if I go to myself, if you're facing Jimmy Anderson, I might have batted more leg side because he's trying to get me out of LBW. When you're facing Stuart Broad, you might go into off stump a bit more because he gets more bounce and you want to cover, getting caught behind, or, how are you going to attack this spinner? There's a whole lot of strategies also as well. And then also we with Callis and Boucher and Enoch, we had to put a lot of work in terms of rebuilding confidence, getting players' techniques up to the level. So there was a lot more of that work than I think we kind of initially expected. We came right down to the basics and had to build it up again.
And you went for a guy like Rassie van der Dussen, a guy like Peter Milan, 30-year-old guys who've been in the system. Was that part of almost fast-tracking that experience, knowing that if you took a guy who's been in the game for 10 years, you're not going to have to teach him as much, perhaps?
Well, I think there's twofold. I mean, you hope that by that stage that he's learnt an element of his own strengths and weaknesses. And I think that South African cricket had moved away from sort of rewarding people who had been successful at domestic level for a period of time. I mean, Rassie had been in the one-day side and done well. He'd shown a good temperament. And it was probably a natural progression for him into the test side. But the Peter Malans and that, so you're picking slightly more experienced guys, hoping that they can bring that experience into play. Also, really trying to send the message that if you perform well consistently and you do the work, that's how you're going to be rewarded. I think that had fallen away out of South African cricket over the last couple of years.
Yeah. It's a natural thing that teams will go through rebuilding. I mean, you retired, Jock Collis, Dale Steyn had his injury problems, Morne Morkel left, Hashim Amla retired. Those are big shoes to fill. Did you expect, before you got involved in cricket, were you surprised by sort of the decline of the team so quickly? Or was that not really unexpected given the kind of players that have left the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, playing on the surfaces that we did in South Africa through various tours maybe hid an element of, the challenges that were coming our way. When you go 4 or 5 seamers on green tops, in South Africa against certain teams, you can get away with it a little bit. And we weren't developing cricketers, we weren't developing players and a team that was going to, be successful in all conditions and challenge people around the world. And I think, then suddenly the tour schedule changes. You move on to 1 or 2 different harder climates where you can't bully people, and suddenly you've got to outplay them, you've got to outthink them, and you've got to have the quality. And we didn't have that at that stage. And I think the goal is to try and rebuild an environment that we can provide, a team that can challenge all around the world.
Yeah.
And I think in the short term now, there was a lot of learning through the summer for us as a leadership group. But our focus in the short term is going to be on white ball cricket. I think, there's a lot of white ball cricket coming up in our calendar. The T20 World Cup was meant to be in October. That there's a chance that may be shifted. So you could have 2 World Cups in a short space of time. Our FTP is largely white ball based, and Test cricket is limited over the next sort of year to 2 years. So that is going to be our focus over this next period.
Yeah, I mean, England successfully did the white ball cricket. They focused on white ball cricket in the 4 years between the 2015 and 2019 World Cup, and that paid dividends, obviously. Is that sort of a model you're going to look at?
I mean, obviously, I think the ideal model would be to have a successful environment across the board. And I think if we can grow a large player pool that is quality, I think at the moment we have a lot of players that are sitting at a similar level. And initially, how do we escalate those players that are in the national side, but at that same level? How do we get them up to high-performing individuals? And then how do we increase the pressure on the national players with players quality coming through? So we're looking at everything. My job is not only just the national side, it's down the pipeline into under-19s, into national academies, high performance. So and on the women side of the game. So it's a fairly extensive job. But once you've appointed Mark and Enoch and your guys, they've got to be accountable for their roles. But yeah, look, Craig, I mean, obviously our goal would be we would love to win a World Cup. I mean, we've been close a number of times, and, we've got to rebuild the squad to be competitive again. I felt that we would have been able to put if all went and goes ahead in October, I felt we would have been able to put a really good unit together to go to that World Cup in Australia. But we'll see what happens.
I mean, the under-19s you mentioned there, they've sort of struggled in the last few years, and there's 1 or 2 players, but as a team they've struggled. Are you more concerned about how the under-19s do as a team, or what kind of 1 or 2 gems come through the squad?
Yeah, it's a balancing act. I mean, you want to be bringing a number of players through. But I think through my under-19 programs, I mean, a lot of the players that played S under-19 went on to play franchise level, went on to represent South Africa. So, the goal is to have a strong under-19 team. We've got to look at those programs, our scouting systems, the coaching at that level. Also from there, under-19, and how do we phase it so kids don't get lost from under-19 and move into franchise? What are the pathways that keep that vision open for cricketers? So there's a lot of work that's being done. I think we've lost track. Even though we've invested a lot of money, I think there hasn't been the quality that they need at that level.
And are there any specific skills that you're really targeting? I think maybe spin bowling, for argument's sake, or is it across the board? Or I mean, we saw how effective a team having a Murali or a Shane Warne could be. I always think of spin bowling as something that maybe South Africa, we haven't really filled that role properly over 20 years. Is that something you think of or not?
There were times when we were touring India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka that we wanted to steal a net bowler or two,
Really?
They're ripping it sideways and got douchers and the likes. And it's a culture, like we produced fast bowlers for many years. They culturally produce great spin options. And it's an area that, obviously we need to grow our depth. Craig, these decisions, it's great to want everything, but at the moment with COVID and some of the stresses that Cricket South Africa has created for themselves, we've also got financial constraints that are going to restrict some of those decisions. You'd love to have, an open checkbook to approach anybody that you want, but you've got to also be smart. There are people still on contract. So, we've got to look at the system and think, how do we bolster it? How do we make people work harder? How do we get the best out of the system? And then, how can we add people in and out to bring value to the system, I guess.
Yeah. You were approached for the role late last year and you turned it down. You sent quite a strongly worded statement. You eventually then, when all the shenanigans at Cricket South Africa, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on all of that, but Tabang Moreau was suspended, you came in.
Yeah.
What sort of changed your thinking at that point to take on the acting role, which has now become a permanent role?
I think just doing the television stuff and being around South African cricket, you can sense that something's going wrong. The path is not where it needs to be. And, when I started engaging with Cricket South Africa, I was, Tabang in particular, just something didn't feel right. There was the leadership, the trust factor wasn't there, and you're going to take on this huge role. And to achieve things in this role, you need to trust that leadership because, otherwise, you want to do things, you want to shift things, you just keep bumping your head. And it's not about control. It's about being able to challenge each other. It's about being able to be robust and have hard conversations and trust that you all, you're going to move forward and hopefully have an opportunity to do something with the job, And I never felt that, every time there was like one step forward, two steps back. It felt like, there's elements of game playing. You start to think, is it worth taking on this pressure, this role, this responsibility when you have zero trust in the people around you? I think, when I did officially decide to do it on an interim basis, things kind of had hit a real wall in South African cricket. The leadership had broken down entirely. Things were being exposed. And then you kind of think, well, let me jump in and see if I can make a difference. Some of those elements are out of the system. Can I get in and help, And then, you 3-4 months in the job and the care factor starts to grow and you start to realize that there's actually, quite a few good people in the system that care a lot, that have lacked leadership and there's some hardworking people around. And you've kept in South Africa and played for 13, 14 years and now you're in this role, it's in your blood, Craig, and you want to see it successful.
Yeah.
And so you just you kind of get in and you say, okay, let me give it a good go.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some big challenges. Let's just swing back to your career, Graeme. You came on the scene, you played a few tests, and then you were made captain at 22. And the first tour, if I recall, was to England, which is always one of the big tours for any cricketer, to the home of cricket. I seem to recall you had lunch with Mike Brearley before that series. And then you went on and scored 277 and 259 in the first two tests. Do you remember anything of that lunch with Brearley and what he told you?
Yeah, I mean, my Brearley lunch actually happened after the double hundreds.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So, no. I mean, at 22, you're trying to meet with whoever possible to try and grow your thoughts on leadership. And even though these people are telling you stuff, it's hard to resonate at the time. You've got your own challenges at 22 and your own sort of way. And, for me, it was about, being single-minded, determination, almost trying to show people that I could handle it and be successful at the same time. It's not a sustainable method, but at 22, it's almost like a self-protection mode, My lunch with Mike was very interesting. I mean, he's a very good thinker, almost in a scientific way. I mean, it was difficult to understand some of the words that he was using at 22. Very, very posh and some big words. But the fact that he took the time to have lunch with me, I remember having a similar one with Mike Atherton. And, it was great that the guys were prepared to sit and pass on some knowledge. But I think it's one of those things, leadership, especially at a young age, you'll have some potential, you'll have credentials, but you've got to grow into the role and understand the challenges that you face within your own environment as well and how to navigate that. And I think that took me time, within their team, within the South African structures, with politics, sponsors, everything. Those are elements that you've got to grow into and learn to navigate and handle well.
Yeah, and it's a role that you certainly did grow into. I mean, your first skirmishes with Australia, you were, as you said, you kind of came out quite forcefully, and obviously they got the upper hand in those early exchanges. How much did you learn from that, though?
I learned an immense amount. I mean, one, how tough it is to play in Australia. I was very naive in the way that I handled that. I remember thinking that we were a young team, and I was watching the press, and Warren and McGrath and all of them were attacking our players in the press, and I kind of thought naively, if I can shift some of that pressure onto me, maybe it'll allow the guys to just play and perform well. But I shifted too much pressure onto myself, and it was a long, tough tour where you learn a lot about yourself as well and what you can handle from a pressure perspective, from the media, the public there in Australia as well. It's very vocal, and then you're playing against some incredible cricketers as well, and I think also it made me really think about the type of team and environment that we needed to have to be successful in Australia.
Yeah.
When we went there on my first tour, we had some good, outstanding players, but we weren't a team that could compete consistently. When you kind of can't compete to a level, but they always had more in the tank. They could handle more pressure. They could exert more pressure. They had a player that performed at a key time, and going there. Post that, the lessons learned were huge in terms of how to approach the tour tactically, how to think, how to approach the media, how to handle the public. It really benefited us in the success that we had after that.
Clive Lloyd famously did it. The West Indies got hammered in Australia in 75, and then they went back with, he went and found a barrage of fast bowlers, and that essentially set the template for the West Indies for the next 15, 20 years, how they dominated. What was your takeaway from that first Australia tour? What were the areas you thought, besides off the field, the media and your own reaction, what on the field, what did you sort of plot?
We needed to be smarter. We needed to be mentally stronger. But I think more than anything, you've got to start with an environment that has the skill to go and consistently win. You've got to have the batters to perform, the bowlers that can take you 20 wickets. And then I think the key was to try and understand Australia tactically. They for so many years they had such a powerful team, and they bullied teams day in and day out. So how were we going to handle that approach? Mentally, how were we going to go into games? How were we going to support each other when the heat was on? And you start to build your own culture within your environment that can handle. And the first sign of toughness. Or things get hard, then how does your environment show up? So I think we were so much smarter tactically. We had the players on the next tour. We could handle pressure. We knew what to expect when they came at us. How were we going to handle it? How were we going to respond? We were so well prepared. Instead of just going in and almost just backing yourself, we had ticked the boxes from a preparation, and players were ready.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a phenomenal series, the one that you finally won, the 2008 series in Australia, to get that win. And, the Perth test was obviously, I think, am I correct in saying, was it Perth where you chased down a massive score in the fourth innings? Yeah.
It was Perth. I mean, I think also we had a very successful tour to India. We drew 1-1, then we beat England for the first time in England. So the confidence in an environment also grows. And we knew sort of the final thing was going to be Australia. That December, January, February period. You're in someone's backyard over Christmas and New Year, playing at the most iconic stadiums in Australia. And Perth. And I think the element that we got under control as well is the emotional side. We were a lot smarter in the way that we handled pressure, the way we handled situations we were in. We were able to talk tactics instead of being up and down. Test match is 5 days. Depending on if it goes 5 days, but it's hard. And every session, you kind of, as a captain, you say this is the most important session. So you've got to be up. So you've got to learn to handle and control yourself for a long and extended period of time. And then when you finish that day, you get up the next day and you've got to do it again. And if you're in someone's backyard, at the Boxing Day Test match, 96,000 Aussies on day one, and day two you're back. You've got to find a way to stay in that place, that zone, and not allow your emotions to kill you.
That was the series where you also famously came out with the broken hand at Sydney, is that right?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, that's ripped into the gloves, off a length. That really has hurt Graeme Smith. That could be a real bad one, that. I reckon he would be absolutely crazy to bat on here.
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute, what's happening? Graeme Smith is coming out to bat. Graeme Smith is coming out to bat. This is a mighty figure.
And I mean, the Aussies, yeah, they give a lot of lip, but do you feel that innings, I wouldn't say they won them over, because that's maybe a bit strong, but certainly earned their respect?
Yeah, I think it had happened through the tour.
One of the great men of the modern game, and Sydney is standing to him.
In Sydney, it was unusual to walk out to rousing cheers and rounds of applause in Australia. So yeah, it was, and I think Aussie public enjoy people who do it tough, and they're not really big fans of the prima donnas in Australia. So I think doing something like that, and I think that whole Test series gripped the nation there and here in South Africa. I mean, I remember flying home after that Test match with a broken hand and arriving at the airports, and there was hundreds of people, and that moment, it's been incredible how many people at that moment touched it. It's still to this day, it surprises me, the conversations. Everyone wants to know about the thoughts behind the scenes and when you were going in and how are you feeling. And it's, that moment, it's one that you just didn't realize when you were in it. But, when you got out of it, how it impacted people was just always blowing me away.
Graeme, you faced a lot of great bowlers in your time. Who was the quickest and who were the most difficult to face?
Yeah, there were some real gas guys. Obviously, I think of the early days like Shah Bakhtar. That was pretty scary on occasions. I remember facing him in East London at PE under not great lights once. You start asking yourself a few questions. I mean, Brett Lee himself was also could bowl the speed a lot, and your adrenaline pumps. There's pros and cons, I guess, to facing that sort of pace. But the quality guys over time, I mean, like a McGraw, it was just brilliant at working you over. He was thinking bowler, had the skills to do what he wanted to. Swinging conditions against someone like Jimmy Anderson and Matthew Hoggard. Obviously, I had my challenges against Zahir Khan and, his style and ability to swing the ball late. But I always say to someone, growing up in South Africa, then going and being able to score runs in the subcontinent is a unique challenge, with the heat, the spinning ball, men around your bat. It's a whole different style and way of playing cricket. And to be able to adapt to that and be successful is often a challenge, and facing spin bowlers like Warne and Muralitharan and Ajmal over the years, and Kumble, you think back to those challenges was unique.
Yeah, and I mean, the IPL quickly, I mean, that changed the face of the game. I mean, you went and played there. And a lot of players who were right, you would have had big battles with Australia and England and India on the field. But when you suddenly started playing with these guys in a club environment in India, did that change relations between the teams at national level?
It did. I mean, I remember, joining Rajasthan Royals, myself and Warnie from that first tour, and had a few tensions, but it was actually incredible how we bonded. I think, Warnie was the head honcho, and I think once we came together, we had a number of young Indian players, and that first season of IPL 2008, I don't think anyone knew what to expect. I remember the auctions and the prices, and everyone was blown away with suddenly what players were fetching. This league, and it was just it was almost like cricket on steroids in that first season. The crowds, the people, the energy through India, the fanfare. And then also being successful at the same time. I mean, it's got to be one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had in the game. I mean, that final when we were trying to get out of the hotel and the bus couldn't move because there were thousands of people outside, and then you can't get into the stadium. It was just mental and how IPL took India by storm. And then being able to experience those cultures, one-on-one with the young Indian guys, with, some of the Australians, and Warnie, and spending some quality time with him, learning about him as a person away from the game and the way that he thought about cricket. IPL has really offered, I think, unique friendships around the world that we all have now, and they're long-lasting.
Graeme, good luck with the Director of Cricketship, and it's going to be a tough year. They might not even get on the field this year. I suppose that's another concern, keeping the players motivated, but I guess that's part of the challenge. So good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I mean, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with international travel, but we believe that we can, cricket, fortunately, with a bit more social distancing than, I guess, rugby and football. So, I think crowds are going to be the huge challenge, but hopefully we'll be able to get something going, under this COVID challenges that we have in time.
Graeme, thanks a lot for your time. This podcast is made possible by our Maverick Insiders. Please consider becoming part of our Maverick Insider community, where for a nominal fee every month, you are supporting quality independent journalism. You also get some cool benefits such as Uber vouchers when the coronavirus pandemic subsides, and engagement with our journalists thrown in. Please go to dailymaverick.co.za/insider to sign up and become part of the Maverick Insider community. Also remember to sign up to our Maverick Sports newsletter, which hits your inbox on a Monday, and never miss another podcast by signing up via your favorite platform. I'm Craig Ray. Thanks so much for joining us this week.